Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/beancast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 497, The Berlin Menstrual Model. For Monday, May 28th, 2018, it's time for this week's edition of the Beancast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. GDPR is now a reality, and with it comes a wave of legal challenges against data collectors over a technicality called forced consent. What exactly is it? And how worried should the marketing world be over it? Tonight, we'll discuss. Also, more fallout from GDPR, Facebook's claim that users are largely opting into ad targeting, Accenture's move into media buying, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's Beancast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the principal consultant at Beetle Moment Marketing, Ms. Emily Binder. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Bob. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you.
Happy Memorial Day. Let me try to say that again. Memorial Day to you as well. Now, next up, we have the founder of C-Spot Run Productions, and now also creative marketing director and branded content producer for Lumini Productions, Ms. Wendy Cooper. Hi, Wendy.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, also joining us, we have senior consultant at X-Plane business strategy expert, Ms. Holly Noto. So great to finally get you on the program, Holly.
I know. Thank you. Long-time listener, first-time caller situation. Thank you.
That's great. And finally, we welcome back managing partner at Cook Wax, Mr. Steve Wax is here. Hi, Steve.
Yo, Bob.
Yo. Well, we've got a lot to cover. It's been a huge week in the news, which is unusual with the lead up to Memorial Day. We usually have nothing to talk about on this, and I usually don't do a show, but there's GDPR this time. Now, General Data Privacy Protection Regulation is the EU's attempt to protect its citizens and keep corporate malfeasance to a minimum. But as with all things that are supposed to be good for us, people have to push the legal boundaries, and that's exactly what's happening right now, which brings up the issue of forced consent. Now, forced consent is basically that little window that comes up when you go to a website that says if you want to continue using this website, you've got to agree to our terms. And if you don't agree to our terms, well, you can just not use our website. It seems like a reasonable way to handle it, but Holly, is forced consent really forcing you to do anything? And is there a legal challenge that's going to result in some really bad things for a lot of marketers out there? What's your take on forced consent and the situation going on right now in the EU?
Well, I think the really simple answer is it's not really forcing any of the consumers. And by consumers, I mean people who use Facebook or Google, or even the hotel chain that you happen to have rewards points with. It's not really forcing any of us to do anything other than clicking that button that says, yeah, I want to keep using your platform. But I think the more complex answer is GDPR can't be bundled in that way. And that's where a lot of litigation is now starting to surface. People are now filing lawsuits around the idea that you can't just bundle consent. You can't just say, by saying yes to you, Facebook, you can now use my data in a non-transparent way as you go day to day. And I think that that's what's going to be really interesting is the amount of effort and time that's going to be spent, especially in the EU, around making those types of, or unbundling consent is where we're going to see a lot of contention and a lot of effort go in there. I'd love to be able to say to you that I think Facebook users, for example, are now going to think of what happened with Cambridge Analytica and get super excited about deciding whether or not they continue to use Facebook under the current conditions of what we would call forced consent. But I think if I'm being a little pragmatic and maybe even a little sort of negative about that, my assessment of people in general, I don't think that more than 1 or 2% of Facebook users are really going to care. I think they've already sort of made this pay to play agreement with Facebook.
Well, we already
where-
have a story that we're going to cover later that gets right into that, right into your point. The fact that Facebook users are just saying yes to using the site. It's having no effect. But there's that bigger issue of if this actually goes through the court system and the courts find that this forced consent, this so-called forced consent of having to approve the use of our data policies before you can use our site, if they say that that's not acceptable, what happens to the entire business? I mean, we're not just talking about Facebook, we're talking about everybody, because there's no way to actually get people to use the site in any kind of meaningful way, right? I mean, there's no
Yeah.
other alternative.
You're talking about a user experience now that has additional steps and interfaces where you've got to consent. Today you clicked on this type of, you searched this piece of information, or today you traded this information with a friend and we'd like to use it. Do we have your consent? And most people who look at user experience online or on platforms or apps are really saying, oh, God, what a headache. This is going to turn users away from us. It's going to create a poor experience. And I think that there's got to be a better way. There's got to be some blending in that soft consent area. And soft consent being as you go through the experience of using a platform, certain types of unbundled consent will appear to you. So can we use this information for political reasons? Can we share this with retailers? And as users, that's the option right now that we're seeing. I think the other option is more tricky. It's the option of really saying, can we rely on, or can we trust these corporations like a Google or an Amazon to do legitimately only share information that pertains to our interests? And that's legitimate interest type of consent, where we say, you don't need to sign away because we're not going to break your trust. We're not going to sell your data to anything outside of, say, you buy a lot of laundry detergent. So we're going to let the manufacturers at Procter & Gamble know that you buy a lot of detergent, so they could market to you when you're on our site within our domain. And that's how we're going to protect your data. And that's a little bit softer. It's not as obvious. It's not as transparent to users, but it's definitely another way to go.
Emily,
I think this
yeah,
is Emily.
I was just going to go to you.
Yeah, you said something interesting about what's going to happen to the business if this is what is required going forward. And I think what we should probably ask ourselves is not just in the weeds of what does it mean for email marketing or Facebook ads, GDPR, but what does it mean kind of on a grander scale, where clearly we've been flying this plane for a while. It is broken. Like, there's an engine out and we're trying to fix it midair and dropping screwdrivers everywhere. It's going to be bumpy. Like, the solution it's not there yet. But this might be kind of the tipping point where, and you talked about this last week, Farah was mentioning, we're going to end up with more of a subscription-based model. You get your content that way, and this touches on blockchain, opting out of seeing ads, being paid to see ads, either or.
Yeah, but okay, so we end up with a situation where people are paying to use a website, paying for content, as opposed to having their data mined for ads. But it still comes down to get that kind of situation, you've got to force a consent decision. You've got to say, you've got to pay us money or you're going to have us mine your data, which is another form of forced consent. It just comes down to
Bob.
saying that you have to do something
It is
in order to
forced.
use our site.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it seems like it's a reasonable way to handle this situation. And yet, right away we have lawsuit trolls coming out of the
But
woodwork.
Bob,
Go ahead.
I had a question, Steve. And this is a question for Holly and for Emily. Is anybody been unbundling consent in a reasonable way to say 5 choices that when you sign in or start up a subscription, so that it isn't piece by piece of the content? Because in a way we're sort of raising a boogeyman here when we say forced consent can't be solved. It seems to me you can do a better job than's being done now. I could be told, here are the ways we're going to use it, just like you laid out a minute ago, Bob, with political, marketing or whatever we'd have to think through what the topics are, but at least that would be better. And I would think a platform that offered a more nuanced consent and a less quote forced one would actually attract, would attract consumers.
Yeah, Steve, you know what? There's an app called Clue, and you probably don't use it because it's a menstrual tracking app. The company,
Well, wait a
based,
minute.
well,
Wait a minute. Yeah, no, go ahead.
the company's based in Berlin, and the founder,
That figures.
she's very much into gathering data about female health and using it for academic and clinical purposes to basically help everybody. But they had what I saw was maybe one of the best. It wasn't a forced consent, it was the opposite. Everything was completely optional. So they said, here's our new privacy policy. You can continue to use your account, and they're absolutely tracking my health data, and I'm fine with that. Or you can keep using the app, delete your account, and just store the data locally on your phone, and you'll still have access to the features, not all of them. And it was just so unobstructed. And
I mean,
I
with all
trusted
the
it.
hubbub about, or all the uproar about this, it seems so obvious that something like that should be an interim step, at least, if not a total solution.
Well, I think you have to look at your different user groups. I mean, you could really start to look at the ethnographics of users and say there are certain types of people. I'm guessing, Emily, you're one of them that actually cares about how your data is being used. And so you will scrutinize those sort of opt-in options, that list of 5 that Steve's talking about. But, I think the other thing that makes me probably a little less optimistic about people is knowing the number of people I know personally who looked at what was coming from Facebook or from WeChat or Snapchat and said, yeah, whatever, I love the service. I don't care if you use my data. And that's where I think most marketers are wondering what's going to happen next. I think this whole thing has brought everything to a head where you're just kind of holding your breath to see how much of this actually is accepted by the users and how much is not. And I think that I'm interested to see what the acceptance rates are on a lot of these social sites or a lot of these information-based sites like Google, to see how many of them actually end up with very little change, or if they do end up moving the needle quite a bit on losing users.
Right. If you look at Facebook, the unique users on mobile were up 7% year over year in April, right when the scandal was hitting.
Yeah. I was at dinner last night with a bunch of people. I live out in Sebastopol, north of San Francisco. And I was out with some people who were definitely not in our trade. And they got to, and it wasn't particularly because I was there, they got into a discussion of how annoyed they were with retargeting. And they were really pretty pissed off about it. So it would seem like that there are specific instances where the user is aware of what's going on, how his data her data is being used, that they do object. So that's why I think unbundling.
My ongoing complaint about that particular complaint that comes up from the general public is that
you're complaining about the complaint.
Well, I mean, you always hear about people talking about retargeting and saying what a terrible experience it is, but it's because people are doing really bad retargeting. When you have a perfect retargeting experience with a relevant piece of content that's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, I would love to get that item, it's so incredibly useful. And the fact that the percentages of response are through the roof in terms of retargeting show us that people actually like retargeting. They just don't like it when it's bad, when it's irrelevant to them.
But my point, Bob, was that you can separate out one media tactic that draws on a particular kind of data that a consumer is aware of that some don't like. I don't argue about retargeting particularly, but I'm just saying it's possible to unbundle some of this stuff for a consumer.
Yeah, so it seems. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh boy, 3 ladies on
Yeah,
the
and
same
it's hard to tell the
show.
voices apart, unlike when you're always the only woman and it's obviously you.
Let's go, Wendy. I think we haven't heard from you. Go.
Okay, thanks. So I kind of take a different look at this. I think you have to look at where the core of the problem and where it's come from. I've been in direct response or direct to consumer marketing for 22 years, and I know Bob has probably a similar background. And we've always been under a lot of compliance standards. We've always had to disclose many things. We've always had to make sure that anytime we collected an email address, a phone number, whatever it might be, that it was opt-in. When someone made a telephone call to a television commercial and they wanted to order a Snuggie, that is an opt-in, okay, because they made that call, they made that inbound call. So I think that it's just, for me, it's incredible to just listen to all of this, because for so long we have been so conscious about protecting the consumer data, because we know how much trouble as marketers we would get in if we were just disseminating this private information that we were collecting. And for many years, we're the only people who are really collecting this private information, until the digital age came around and everybody said, wahoo, look at this. We're just going to be able to, live in everybody's living rooms with them. So the core of the problem really for me is that it was the wild, wild west. And Bob, we've been talking about it for years on the Beancast. It's the wild west in the digital space.
Oh yeah, don't even get me started. I mean, it's just like I absolutely agree with you.
Please don't get him started.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think that GDPR at its heart is a good thing for the industry, because it holds us to account, it holds to standards, it's good for the consumer, and it's ultimately going to be better for marketers. And we're going to get to that in just a minute with the second topic. But what my concern is with forced consent, is it too restrictive, and what does the end game become if something like this is held up in courts? But, I think that you, especially Emily's example of the menstrual cycle app, I mean, the way that they handled it was elegant, and it allows the user to continue to use the service without having to be forced to give up their personal data. But in that case, I'm assuming that app costs some money. You have to pay for it up front. So they're making their money based on an app sale, which is completely legitimate and it's completely fine. But a company like Facebook or Google have built a model based on advertising so that we get free service. And how do they exist if a court upholds this forced consent rule and says you can't just say you can't use the service if we can't use your data? Because what happened?
Bob, come on. They have so many users, pay $2.99 a month. Who isn't going to pay $2.99 a month to not have to hassle with any of this stuff and just become a pay-for-play based platform? Seriously.
we've seen over the top fail over and over and over again.
But
There's
Bob,
very few.
wait. Bob, I'm sorry, but it's not a question of charging for it. That's just something that Facebook could afford to build into its platform.
What we're really talking about when we're talking about forced consent being bad is by saying you get to use our service for as much as you want without ever being targeted, without ever creating any kind of value for us. And, essentially what you're doing is you're ruining a business model. And yeah, okay, so Facebook makes a lot of money, big deal. But what about that smaller company that's struggling, trying to get out there? They're going to be decimated by this because they can't actually have any kind of idea that, takes your data and uses it in any kind of meaningful way, because
I don't know.
Your data. Hold on. Yes.
Yeah, he went down the cul-de-sac there.
Yeah, your data is meaningless unless your data is So if you're that small shop, let's just say, your data is meaningless unless you have millions and millions and millions of names. Anyway, nobody cares about your 1,000 or 500,000 names or data that you have. It's not big enough. Nobody cares.
But also, Bob, again, we're talking about possibly unbundling it, to use the Berlin menstrual model. And simply, what I was simply saying is that model ain't bad. And if you use that and it was included for free at the front end when you sign into Facebook or Google or even some, very small one, that would begin to solve the problem. And it's not like everybody's going to opt out of everything that's available for advertising. It's been proven that most people won't. Zuckerberg, on one of the articles that you posted, talked about how, I suppose we should trust him on this, how many people opt in on advertising. It's just that people may want to opt out of something else,
Fair enough.
Don't give it to the Russians. How about if that was a choice?
I don't remember if it was Wendy or Emily who said that moving to more of a subscription-based model could be the way to create an elegant solution for this. But I think about a lot of the way that I consume entertainment, and a lot of people do now, which is we've kind of jumped over to subscription-based services of just streaming, entertainment. And that for me, you can get a mix of things, whether you decide that you want to be targeted with marketing, you can get a cheaper subscription rate by agreeing to look at advertisement, or you can pay more and you can avoid the advertisements. I think that
But
a
isn't
lot
that
of
forced
But
consent?
but
Isn't that
but
forced
wait, that
consent
doesn't
in
mean
the
they're
end?
not going to share your data. I mean, you still have to agree or not agree to the whole data thing now, right? Of the personal information or whatever, even
no,
if it's
I agree
subscription
with that.
based.
I think the point of it is that I think that there is definitely an appetite and a tolerance for subscription-based experiences.
Yes.
And I think given that, a lot of platforms like Facebook and all of their sub brands would benefit from actually considering, maybe not as the only solution, but as a solution, because it would definitely open up the market to a wider range of people who would continue to use their platform. It wouldn't just be you said yes to the bundled, consent, or you said no and now you can no longer use our platform. Give us some options. Like let's understand that there are definitely striations in your market and your user groups and your look at it that way, and think about how easy it is to just offer some options. I think just like offering your soft consent opt-in options, you think about ways to create value for your users.
I want to continue this conversation on GDPR into a different angle. It's one thing to discuss the ramifications in theory prior to the rollout. It's quite another thing to see the actual impact and see how many businesses are being affected. So, Wendy, first, there's the endless barrage of opt-in emails. This has to be having some kind of disastrous effect on mail files, right? I mean, you've gotten all these emails saying you've got to now contact us and opt in, and it doesn't matter whether you're an EU citizen or not. I mean, all of us are being put into this bucket. So, is this good or bad for email marketing?
Well, first of all, let me say this. I don't open those things. Are you guys opening all of those things that you're getting? My husband just said to me the other day, he goes, I don't care. I'm not opening. I'm not even looking at them.
I mean, I look at it as a great cleaning of the house, because
Yes.
every single one of those comes in. It's like, yeah, I don't need that. Yeah, I don't need that. But there have been a few that I have opened up because I'm like, yes, I want to stay engaged with this company. And I in a way that seems like it's a really positive experience for the brand and for me, because I get what I want and the brand gets to clean their mail file of all these people who really don't care about them.
Right. But that's you. That's me. That's Emily. That's, Steve. That's Holly.
You
That's
know
people
marketers
who
are the
know
worst.
what's
You
going
know
on,
that
but
you know that
the average consumer that's receiving these emails, believe me, they are scrolling right past them. They're not opening them, and I think it's a waste. I agree with you that it's kind of going to clean up that whole email thing where you're not getting so many emails or whatever. But I have to be honest with you. I really don't think people outside of our realm in advertising and marketing really even know what the heck is going on.
I'm deleting them. I'm up here. I'm not paying attention to them. I'm not even scrolling by.
Right.
I'm just deleting them.
Yeah.
The notices, and that's probably the wrong thing to do, Bob. You're probably right. You should look at them and say, "Oh, do I really want this?" But I don't have the time, and I also I unsubscribe all the time, so I just rely on subscription.
So what does that do? I mean, email marketing is still a tremendously effective means of marketing, and GDPR only impacts the European metro region. I mean, it's not something that is enforced. No, it's not something that's enforceable in the US. It's not something that's enforceable in Asia, but it's impacting all the email marketing around the globe. I mean, I'm wondering what the end result is in terms of effectiveness. Do email marketers have to now go back to square one and start rebuilding that file, one name at a time? Because it's like so few
Does
people.
anybody know the answer to that? Hey, I was just in Italy for 2 weeks, just got back a few days ago, and nobody's talking about this over there. Believe me, nobody. So.
Similarly, I was just in Madrid and nobody was talking about it either. And I think that that's the fascinating part, which is we look at this like, oh, wow, Europe is really handing us a bad deal here. They're changing the way we work just because they have, a burning platform that they've got to deal with. But I didn't hear anybody bring it up. And I was actually there working with clients in a similar space. And either they've got it under control, which is the most likely situation, which is they've figured out how to get by for now, or they're going to look at it the way one of my actual clients looks at it, which is here's a huge opportunity to look at the way you're capturing and using data and actually increase the monetization of your data. Now, how much there, I have a client who's actually looking this as, oh, this kind of data now could have some level of scarcity. I could have to actually be much more cognizant of who I'm capturing data from and how I'm capturing it and how I use it. I could be actually monetizing or increasing the monetization of the data that I'm actually trading and selling in a B2B context. And I'm wondering if that's the case. I don't necessarily see it happening yet, but we're having these conversations in our strategy meetings about, how valuable is the data we're capturing and how do we, under compliance, sell that, make it more
Right.
valuable?
And even even the people who are ignoring, swiping, not answering, whatever, that's still valuable data, right? So you're going to look at that and you're going to say in your meeting, you're going to look at that and say, okay, well, we have 60% of the people just never answered us, right? And you have to take that and you have to analyze that and say, okay, so who are they? Do they not care? Do they not care about us? And are they a valuable consumer or customer?
But you know how email marketing works. Everybody here on this call knows how email marketing works. Even if you have a tentative connection to a company, if you see something that's really kind of special and you really want it, you're going to respond to that email. And it's, people respond to email marketing messages all the time from
Yes.
companies that they don't have any kind of meaningful relationship with, but they see a really cool deal come across their email box and they respond to it. And now that's not going to happen. And I think that that's going to have a chilling effect on advertising via the
Bob,
email
why do
marketing.
you think it's? I'm sorry, but well, first of all, I wanted to answer your questions. I'm involved with a number of clients, and one of them is very big into e-commerce and email marketing, working with HubSpot and 2 or 3 digital agencies. And nobody has talked about this. It's I'll bring it up tomorrow or on Tuesday. But why do you think this is going to be so destructive?
Well,
I didn't quite get
because
the argument.
because these email data files are going to be purged of everybody who didn't respond to GDPR at some point in order to be in compliance. They need to have a data file that is clean and opt-in, and they need proof that every person on that data file is opt-in, or else they open themselves up to huge amounts of fines in terms of doing business in the EU. And that's a big concern for a lot of companies, and it could potentially
that's a
be
really
very
good point.
disastrous.
That's true. That's a really good point.
Well, however they got the email addresses in the first place, whether that's you went on their website and you signed up in that exit pop-up, they will slowly build the list up again, and it will be the same people that they would have had anyway, those who are actually going to the site or are interested. I mean, maybe there will be a dearth for a while, a couple years to build it back up.
And it'll be more valuable, right? It will be really true people who really care about the brand, the service, the product, whatever it might be. It's not going to just be, because email lists are bought and sold every day, right? They're bought and sold every day. I get a ton of emails every day that, hey, how the heck? I don't know you. I don't care about you. And why are you emailing me? So, and I'm going to ignore all of that. So the value of that email list over time is going to become, what's the word for it? It's just going to be more valuable because it's going to be people who really want to be there, who really care about what you have to say, sell, or give as a service.
I love that. I love what you're saying because I think of a real life example in my own life. I bought a vintage helmet from World War II for my son because he likes to actually create environments where he shows different battles. And he wanted the vintage helmet. He wanted it for a Halloween costume. I buy it for him. A month later, I'm getting emails from the NRA telling me, yeah, absolutely. I'm getting emails from the NRA telling me how I can protect my gun rights. And I'm thinking, by the way, I'm a big fat hippie tree hugger and I would never touch a gun in my life. My son is a historian. And I think about how invalid my data was to the NRA. I'm poor NRA. They think I'm now part of their target audience, but I'm not. And they're wasting a lot of effort and time marketing to me and selling my data to other people who've now been marketing to me. And I've had to unsubscribe and get, super annoyed. And I think of what you're saying is a real life example of there will be the dearth, but we will build these lists up over time and the lists themselves will be more valid, more accurate, and actually more valuable in that sense of knowing that these are really
Yes.
are true subscribers to either your product or your service. People are really interested in what you have to offer, and that makes it much more direct in the direct marketing sense.
Another big impact of regulation that's coming up over GDPR is a decimation of programmatic advertising in EU countries. We've been critical of programmatic on this show. I mean, anybody who's listened to the show for any amount of time knows how critical we've been of it. But is no automation any better? I mean, Emily, what's your take on that? Is the reduction of programmatic in the EU a good thing, or is it potentially destructive to the advertising business out there?
Well, so the ad exchanges have seen the European ad demand volumes plummet anywhere from, I think it was 25 to 40%. But that's just this initial shock and fear. I think it will fade. Yeah, programmatic, I don't know, it's kind of a crazy topic. Does anyone else have anything to weigh in on this?
Here's something, and I'm only taking away. I really noticed it because when I was I was only in Italy, and in the evening sometimes or in the morning, I would want to watch something English, and so I would watch a lot of YouTube, and when I'm in the U.S. and I'm watching YouTube, which I do a lot, I'm always getting hit with this Stewart who wants to sell you this great online business, and all of his downline of people that are doing this and interrupting me all of the time. And I get so frustrated by that. I hate them. But when I was in Italy, it was really awesome because every commercial that came up on YouTube, regardless of what I was watching, was a branded, high quality, beautiful commercial. And that was awesome for me. So I'm not sure if that has anything to do with how they work programmatic over there, but
well, I think this is more about the response that there was one article that was quoting that programmatic advertising has been brought to practically nil in the EU in the run up to GDPR because programmatic causes so many problems when it comes to consent to the user's use of any kind of user data, that it's just become impossible to do.
Plus the claims are typically way over the top, and that was just something that happened in Washington D.C. this past week about those kind of claims and what's going on.
Holly, what's your take on this situation? I mean, is programmatic just kind of a red herring argument? It's kind of not all that important in the end because we need to be doing advertising better, or is programmatic still important to the advertising mix and something that we've got to solve in order to stay in business in the EU?
Well, I first have to admit that I think I have a vague notion of what programmatic advertising is. But if I'm interpreting this right, I love programmatic advertising. It's one of I love it. I love it that I can be on YouTube and looking up a project to do with my child who loves to craft, and I will get an ad from Michaels, which is a 20-second ad that tells me that they're having an online sale for 50% off, which thrills me to no end because I hate spending a lot of money on shit my kids can throw away. But I love programmatic advertising. I think it's smart. I think it's, if that's what programmatic advertising is.
No, that's exactly what it is. I mean,
I like meaningful advertising. I like advertising that speaks to me because it knows me based on my behaviors, which is where the conundrum comes in with GDPR, right? Because I really do want an experience that's closer to a YouTube experience where I can be looking at something that's interesting to me. It follows either a passion or a hobby or a professional line of inquiry for me. And it tells me something I would not have known if I hadn't been there. And that's meaningful. And I think that if anything, that's the platforms like YouTube. I don't think that they're in jeopardy of hitting any kind of negative legal side of this because I can't see how they are doing it other than how they're infringing on GDPR. I think that there's really no conflict in there unless I'm not reading GDPR correctly.
Right. YouTube's great for that. It feeds up things that you're actually interested in. It's almost like the Amazon of content. It's always, oh, do you like this based on what you did last time? And it's usually right.
Well, but and here's the thing. I mean, it may be a good experience. Wait a minute. It may be good experience. It may be a bad experience. I think that we've had both extremes expressed here, but the result of GDPR is it goes away. And
Yeah.
for the good people, it goes away. For the people who are having bad ad experiences, it goes away. So for the bad experiences, this is, hallelujah. It's great for you. For the
I look,
people who are actually benefiting from these ads, it's just now they get more noise because the ads don't stop, just the programmatic buying stops. So the
right.
targeting goes
That's the
away.
point.
And so that you
That's
get
Yeah.
more noise and less relevance in your ad experience. That doesn't sound like a good thing at all.
But there's
well,
also another, I mean, we're talking about a user experience. What about the experience of marketers who are placing the buys and
right,
the rampant ad fraud? So if that goes away, that's a good thing. They'll have to just get more creative and target
right,
properly.
right. Thank you. That's what I wanted to say. I just
Well,
wanted to say that what I was hearing is I was hearing it from a consumer point of view, right? Where then you turn the other direction and you look at it from a technical point of view, from a strategic, tactical point of view, from the marketer side of things. So those are two very different things. So what is the question? Is the question from which viewpoint? Because if it's from the consumer viewpoint, like I hate the Stewart ones where everybody says, hey, you want to get rich or come to the seminar or do this online business. I'm sitting here in my beautiful Ferrari. You can't do that anymore, by the way. That was just, you can't like go and do these stupid ads where you're sitting on a showroom in a Ferrari and having your picture taken and saying, hey, you're going to make $1 million if you just join my free webinar thing that I do. You can't do that. But from a technical perspective of programmatic buying, media buying and planning, I've always hated programmatic. Because I just think it takes the intelligence of media buying and placement and all of that great stuff that I love out of the equation and throws it into a robot somewhere and says, here,
there needs to be a blending of the two, though. I think
Mhm.
when you're talking about digital advertising, it's no longer like you were buying a cable buy where you were putting it on, doing scatter on certain programming based on audience demographics, and you could do a handshake deal and fax your order in. We're talking about a level of complexity that it becomes almost near impossible to do the kind of placement that you need to get the coverage that is required for the reach and frequency to make an ad campaign work online. But at the same time, you need human interaction. And I think that's the intent of GDPR. But the result of GDPR is we take all that out of the equation and we get more noise and less effective ads. And I don't think that that's the solution either. So I think this is going to be something that we struggle with as an industry for the next few months, at least, if not the
Bob,
next couple of years.
Bob,
And yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, well, to what extent have media companies and programmatic platforms investigated how they can simplify or solve the problem you're talking about? But it seems like it's a hugely invested industry that's going to have to
Oh,
deal with
they've
GDPR.
been all ramping up on GDPR, response for a number of years. I mean, at
I mean, in
least.
terms of programmatic, I'm talking about.
Well, I know from the programmatic
Okay.
universe, they've been actively working the problem, but it's like I said when I started this topic, it's one thing to talk about it in theory, it's another thing to see the actual results
Yeah.
of what's going down and try to work through the problems in the field. And I don't think that this problem is solved. It's solvable, but I don't think that it's solved, and it's something that we're going to struggle through for a while. An interesting side note on all this data debate comes by way of Mark Zuckerberg. He claimed that most users on his platform have been actively opting in for ad targeting in the wave of GDPR compliance efforts. Emily, obviously forced consent plays a part of this. That's why they're getting the kind of results they're getting. Otherwise, they probably would not. But is this also revealing that customers will put up with anything if they find something valuable enough? What's your take on Zuckerberg's announcement that opt-ins are going quite well for them?
He's right. People will put up with anything if they find it valuable or if it's their drug of choice. So people are literally addicted to social media. If you look at the dopamine rush that hits your brain when you get a
Yep.
notification, that's why people won't give up Facebook. They're probably a little concerned about their privacy issues, but it's like looking for their next hit. It's a drug addict. They're not going to give it up. I mean, you'd have to do something so egregious. Facebook is always asking forgiveness, not permission. It's what they've been doing for 10 years.
Yeah, I
People
mean,
people don't like change, you guys. They don't, and they love their Facebook. And if something maybe pops up and says, "Hey, you gotta click this thing if you want to keep using us," you click it. I mean, seriously, it's really, like I said, we're all talking about it, but besides us and maybe 10 other people and some people in the EU, I don't think anybody is really up in arms about this as much as you would like
well,
them to
that's what
be.
that's what the heart of my question is about this topic. It's I understand that forced consent is in play, so people love Facebook, they find it valuable, they're willing to put up with ads in order, and the targeting and use of their data to get those ads to you. They're willing to put it up with it in order to continue with the service. But I'm wondering, if you took forced consent out of the equation, would people still want to have their data mined and used for ad targeting? I'm wondering how much of this is really just a matter of the forced consent issue, and how much of it is people actually like to have these relevant ads on Facebook show up and they actually respond to them, which is
I
borne up
I
by the
think
data.
I think most people don't even realize it's happening. They
Yeah.
go on their Facebook page, they're looking at their photos, they're looking at this, they're looking at their feed, whatever it is that they're doing, they don't even really care. You know, I just don't think people in general care.
I would say most people not only don't care, but they don't really want to put the time into understanding exactly what they're consenting to. I think the most brilliant, fantastic invention of our age is the online consent form, where you have to scroll down many, many pages till you get to the bottom and click, because I know I do it. And if anybody on this call tells me that they read those 3 pages of legal jargon, I'm going to bow at your feet, because I scroll to the bottom and I click yes, because I want to get to the next page. I want to
That's
get
right.
to the new thing. And so that's brilliant. The brilliant invention is using a legal jargon to get us to the point where we think, God, I just want to do this. I want to get that hit of dopamine. So I think, no, I think that when we think about it, we have to say most people are not going to stop and think about it. They love their Facebook. They love using any of the sub brands that Facebook owns, like Snapchat, because it's the way they operate in the world. It's their social connection. And even if we were to take a soft opt-in option, where you get a menu of 5 things stated to you quite simply, do you agree to allow Facebook to use your data for these 5 things? Many people may stop and look, but most still want that quick hit of being able to go use Facebook. So they're going to click yes, 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 and move to the next screen.
And,
I
and
think it's
just
like going down an alley to buy drugs and you're like, oh, is it cut with baking soda? I don't really care. I just need this right now.
Hey, just to clarify, for the sake of listeners out there, if Facebook doesn't own Snapchat, they own Instagram. But the point is well taken, and I just wanted to make sure that we're
But
clarifying that.
Bob, you're also making a good point, because what I think you're getting to is that maybe a legal problem, not a consumer problem, particularly in Europe, because it, I would think that, as I really agree about the scrolling down invention and how brilliant it is. I can't imagine court under these kind of context about consent, knowledgeable consent, wouldn't say you've got to provide one paragraph, and this may exist, but I haven't seen it. You've got to provide 2 paragraphs at the most to explain what you're signing when you opt in terms of service. You know what I mean? I think I think that the issue is what are the European courts going to do, which may turn out to be like the California regulations on automobiles, which basically run the automobile regulations in the
You
U.S. in terms of
know,
smog.
one of the things that I'm noticing from my opt-in experiences, and I'm not enough of an expert on GDPR to know whether this is a requirement of the law, but I'm seeing a lot less of that legal jargon type
Yeah.
experience. I'm seeing plain worded English phrases being telling me what exactly I'm giving up when I click on an item. So I think that, even though that EULA idea was so powerful because it just made us, sign away our lives because it was so much easier to just go through this legal document and not read it. I think that the law is giving us a better experience on that front, and that's a positive, at least in
It-
in
I,
my
I
estimation.
actually
You're
read
right.
part of the
It's-
regulations, and I saw in there requirement, I believe, for simplicity.
Yes, there are a couple of
Yes.
parts of this are founded on simplicity and transparency. So you will see. as a person, as a user, would love to see more of that soft opt-in with simplicity and transparency. But as somebody who works with marketers, well, I'm willing to give and take there a little bit more, because I understand that a lot of smaller companies, like you were talking about earlier, Bob, that are having to now update their platform to provide this level of simplicity and transparency. It does cost them money to do it, and so they're trying to find the easiest, most direct way to do it without having to disrupt their current pattern of service or delivery.
We've been doing it for a very long time in direct to consumer marketing. There's been examples forever about let's just say you're ordering a product and you see it on television, you see it online or whatever, and you say, oh, pay shipping and handling, and you get your first order or your first 30 days for free. Well, what has to happen there is that you have to make sure that by the checkout, where you say checkout, yes, this is what I'm paying, there is a full disclaimer that basically is saying you are agreeing to a 30-day shipments, for the next 6 months, for the next year, whatever, in order to have this offer that we're giving you. I can't tell you how many years that has been in place, that we've had to always make sure that this disclaimer with a checkbox is there, so people understand that you're not just getting it for free, you really are just getting the first shipment free, and the next are going to be charged to your credit card and shipped to you every 30 days, blah, blah, blah. So, we're kind of used to this stuff. We have to be transparent. We've always had to be transparent. We've always been under this scrutiny of the FTC, as much as people don't think that in direct response we were. Super, super transparent, and we've always been working with the FTC in Washington D.C. to create these kind of like laws and rules and best practices, right? So for me, I look at this GDPR thing and it's like, well, no kidding, what took it so long?
Well, we only have a few minutes left, so I want to get to this last topic, the black sheep of the news cycle this week. It has nothing to do with GDPR, although it does have some ramifications for Accenture, given that GDPR is going to affect them on this move. Accenture is moving into media buying now. So, Steve, this move was inevitable. We're watching the management consultancies move into the agency territory, and now, of course, Accenture moving into media buying is a natural next step for them. But is their timing bad, considering both the realities of GDPR and the fact that a majority of brands are moving their programmatic operations in-house? I mean, yeah, I can't see them getting involved with this for any other reason other than they want to do programmatic advertising. Why, is this a smart move for them?
Well, it depends on I tried to find what they projected the business would be from programmatic, which they are involved in already. They bought companies and they're doing it, versus what they're being paid to analyze media. Which was a big part of their consulting practice. I mean, they originally were part of an accounting firm, and then they split off and became, more about processes, industrial processes. So that's why, in a funny way, programmatic sort of fits into their wheelhouse. And but it's crazy. I mean, what they're proposing to do, and a lot of people complained about it. All their competitors, for instance, which
of course we
do.
did.
Advertising was scared to death of what they're up to. It's kind of like if you were suing a company and the judge suddenly said, well, I'm going to hear this case, but I'm also going to take the other guy's side too. It's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be the judge and analyze, neutrally or fairly. But I think the solution, on the other hand, what goes on in pitches and what goes on between clients and agencies is everybody's analyzing the success of the last guy or the guy who's got the account, and having lunches and meeting on golf courses and explaining to him or her why their marketing is a failure and please hire my company. So what they ought to just do, so there's a bias out there already about data and about how your advertising is working coming from your competitors. And there's a bias for it coming from you if you're the agency of record. So what Accenture should just do is take their analytic practice and move it into their advertising practice, into the programmatic practice, and say, yeah, we have the best analytics, and if you hire us as a client, we'll use that, and we'll do the programmatic for you. So that would be my humble suggestion to them, is stop trying to play both, judge and contestant at the same time. the other side of it, whether GDPR or the programmatic moving in house, is simply a money question. And since they're very good at analytics and they're inside so many big companies, they must be looking at and saying we can make more money by doing this, even if we get shut out of the analytic business in the future in terms of at least advertising.
Well, they probably feel as though they can do a really great job at it. I mean, here's a company that prides itself on, a long history. What did they used to be called? They used to be called something else.
Arthur Anderson, years and years
Anderson.
ago.
Exactly. So, they're probably looking at it where, well, we've got all this department or whatever they want to call it, where they're advising and consulting and looking at all this data all of the time for their clients, and maybe they're realizing, hey, look at this and look at that, and why aren't they doing this and why aren't they doing that? Well, if
I
we
think that's it
could be
exactly.
the ones that are actually executing the programmatic advertising, we could make that so much more effective and efficient. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably where it's coming from.
That is exactly where it's coming from. But I think Steve's point kind of caps it off nicely. They are playing judge and jury. Their business is to assess the ad spend and to make recommendations on where to actually take your money and place it. It's just like, is there waste within the business and how can they best solve that problem? This makes them less effective as a consultant and more about the money, which is problematic. So I can see why the
It
industry
also
association is
raises
something.
questions about their ethics.
Ethical issues, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, remember when Dick Cheney a long time ago, under one of those Republican presidents who actually was a reasonable person, he was he was in charge. Dick Cheney was in charge of hiring somebody to be something like Secretary of Defense or something, and then he appointed himself. Do you remember? It's kind of like that.
It kind of is.
I actually love that you're bringing up this weird kind of the sort of, it gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit to think of management consultancies going into sort of media buying, because despite everything you said is true about the analytics and the capability to really target the right marketing channels, management consultancies, especially Accenture and the like, have been classically known for over-industrializing things. And I just think they're going to suck the creativity and life out of it. I do. I mean, that's just kind of what they're great at. They're so great at packaging the process. We've got this down to a science. Well, I hate to break it to you, big management consultancies. Part of what makes great marketers and advertisers great is that they don't suck sort of the life out of it to the point where it can be industrialized. They have the nuances of humanity built into it. And they're good at understanding not just the trending pattern of human behavior, but sort of the motivators of human behavior. And they're relatable. And so I'm curious to see what happens with this, because if they do what management consultancies are famous for, it could be a little flat. Even it could be successful, but it could also flatten some of what we look at as great marketing.
Isn't it sort of a symbol of how robotic programmatic is?
Exactly.
They'll be good at it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll be great at that. I just, I look at the other aspects of it and go, oh, okay, so we're going to industrialize that now.
Well, it's time
I remember once that when I'm sorry, Bob, I remember
we're going to wrap up the show.
McKinsey was brought in. McKinsey was brought in to oversee Crispin Porter's handling, I think, of the Burger King account. that was a great meeting of cultures.
Oh my gosh, that must have been incredible. Well, it's
love to have been a fly on the wall for that.
Yeah, me too.
Well, let me start wrapping up. It's time for the AdFel 5, but before we do that, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Emily Binder. You can find her at BeetleMoment.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Emily. What would you like to promote?
Thank you, Bob. I've been working on something new that will be useful to most of you listening to the Beancast, especially anyone in account-based marketing. Buyer personas. As marketers, we spend so much time creating buyer personas that we don't get around to building the content that we want to. And some of us may even admit to not doing our due diligence and even creating them in the first place. So my co-founder Sandra and I thought, why isn't there a place marketers can go and just download tried and true customer personas from marketers in their industry and share the great ones that they've built? So we have a site where you can do that. And there's actually a special page just for Beancast listeners at personabay.com. So go check it out and find out what you can get out of Persona Bay. That's personabay.com/beancast.
Slash
That's
Beancast.
that's the best promotion I've ever experienced
I
on
was
the
going to
show.
say, Emily, I love you.
Emily.
I love you too,
Wow.
Wendy.
Well, next up we have Wendy Cooper. You can find her at lumini.com or cspоtrun.com. These are both places where she exists and
Yes.
does work. So tell us what's going on in your world, Wendy. What would you like to promote?
Well, actually, Bob, I kind of got the bug to, after seeing you in Los Angeles, to do some live speaking again. So I did that for many, many, many years. And now I am thinking, I'm working towards really getting out into the speaker circuit. Lumini is a great place to work, and as a creative marketing director and all of that, but it is a post-production house, and it's a little confining for me, I have to admit, after 22 years of being an entrepreneur and having C-Spot run. But I'm available for speaking gigs on many different topics, such as consumerism, and also the Me Too movement and things like that, and being a cancer survivor. And also, I'd love to I never do this when I'm on the show, and I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to give a shout out to my son, who is an awesome artist. And I would love everybody to just go on Instagram and check out BYE Chance, because he is a great, great artist here in downtown LA and the Los Angeles area. So check him out. And that's really that's really it.
Wendy,
all I
you
have.
are a great speaker. A lot of fun being on that panel with you. So definitely
Bob.
give her a call. Next up, we have Holly Noto. You can find her at xplane.com. That's xplane.com. Tell us, Holly, what's going on in your world? What would you like to promote?
I'd love to just promote Explain. We are actually expanding who we are in our footprint globally. We currently have offices in Portland and Amsterdam, but we just opened up a joint venture with a company in Doha. So you can find us pretty much anywhere in the world. We're a very fluid network of consultants, and we're not typical management consultants. In fact, our goal is to co-create, to create human-centric design as well as visual thinking. I can say this, if you're interested in anything that's trending right now in our world, we're seeing a huge uptick right now in customer experience design, and not just designing for customers, but taking that customer experience discipline and methodology in-house. So we're seeing a huge trend of taking big ideas like design thinking into the new culture of your business. And if you have any questions about design thinking, customer experience methodology, you should definitely tap into us. And Explain.com just actually expanded what's in our Explain store. So if you're looking for things like quick analytics or cards or kits that you can use to take strategy in-house or analytics in-house, like barriers to change or barriers to activation, check us out. We've got a great online store where you can get all kinds of great tools that you can use right away on your own.
You know, Xplane is still one of my favorite companies of all time. I'm really a big fan of them, and it's just like Holly is a big part of what they do. So if you want to get in touch with her, definitely reach out to Xplane. Next up, we've got Steve Wax. You can find him at Cook Wax. You'll see the link on the site. But tell us what's going on in your world, Steve. What would you like to promote?
Well, let's see. I've got 3 clients I'm working for. I'm an investor and marketing advisor to 3 startups, and I'm on 3 nonprofit boards. And I'm a huge fan of the IAB research that you used for some of the stuff in this show. Having been on an IAB committee, I'm a big advocate. But my main thing is to say, if you live, I'm working on a 3rd campaign or a 4th campaign for the sheriff of Sonoma County, for a guy named John Mutz, who's a fabulous law enforcement expert. So if you live in Sonoma County, vote for John Mutz for sheriff on June 5th.
Oh, that's fantastic. I don't know anything about him, but I'll take your recommendation. If I ever move there within the next week or so and register to vote, I will take you up on that.
Bob, it's worth moving here for him.
Yeah,
And
it's
for more-
lovely up
Is
there.
that good?
For more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me, and you can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it out at thebeancast.com. And don't forget, transcribeme.com/beancast is the place where you can get transcription done. They are the official transcriber of the Beancast, and you can get transcriptions of this show within a week over on the site, thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in marketing, advertising, and public relations from the last week. And first up, if you weren't completely convinced, Wendy, that Amazon's Alexa personal assistant was really a brand-based spy in your home, get ready to change your mind. A woman had her private conversation both recorded and then sent to a random contact in her phone directory. I love this story, because it's just like the Amazon engineers have explained it all, but it's still, this private conversation was recorded, which means how many other private conversations are being accidentally recorded?
Okay, so are you ready to hit your beep button?
Yeah, don't
telling
make
you.
No, don't
I
make
won't
me
do
hit
it.
the
I
beep
won't do
button.
it. Bob. I won't do it. I was just joking. But I think it's the most. You know how I feel about Amazon. Actually, on my blog site, cspottalk.com, I just posted this long article about being an Amazon seller, and that Amazon actually, you guys, had the original author take off of the internet because I was so honest about my experience as an Amazon seller. So, no shit.
I know. I know. This one just got me. It's kind of like, okay, it's this benign assistant in your house, but we're also recording
Do you
you.
own one? Bob, do you own
I do
an
not. I do
Echo?
not. I do not. And it's not for fear of them. It's just because I live in a one-bedroom apartment. Why do I need something like this to assist me on
Oh, I would
everything? I mean, I
never
can
have
reach.
Jeff
I can
Bezos
reach
in my
every
living
wall
room,
within.
ever.
I can reach every wall and every light switch within a couple steps. So I live in New York. It's a very small place. Well, next up. Remember how Apple swore to us that the iPhone 6 wasn't prone to bending and forced us to spend our own money to fix the devices? Remember that, Steve? Well, leaked memos revealed this week that they knew all along that the phone was prone to bending and prone to breaking, and they were actively trying to fix the problem behind the scenes. Boy, this one was just a PR nightmare for them this week.
I remember buying a 6 and being very careful not to sit on it because of that problem. But beyond that, my son-in-law works at Apple, so I'm not going to say anything.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I have a 6 and I'm trying to bend it right now.
Now, because we never ever learn, Snapchat is trying again with a revised version of their location tracking because we need to track our friends, is what they're telling us, Holly. Never mind the ad tracking, which is their real goal. This whole drive for location-based via this app, when everybody... I mean, why can't they just be upfront about it, that this is about advertising tracking, not about connecting you with your friends?
This type of thing makes me want to take, a pot out of my pot drawer, cover my head in tinfoil, and hide from the rest of the world. I just want to say, please just be transparent. Just tell us that we want to offer you content. We want to offer you advertising based on where you are. We want to actually go into that Minority Report type of world where we see you coming down the street and we let you know, by the way, this place you shopped at before has a sale today. I mean, I actually am one of those people who likes targeted marketing that is valuable to me because it offers me some level of benefit. So tell me. Don't be cagey about it. I will trust you more if you're more transparent.
Exactly. I just do not understand this mentality anymore. Next up, proving once again that if you call something autopilot, it better darn well drive your car and not kill you. Tesla now has to refund the money spent on the feature over false advertising, Emily. I'm looking at this and I'm just going, what possesses you to call a product autopilot when you know that you got to keep your hands on the wheel or at least hovering over the wheel at all times? It's not autopilot. It's bound to come back and bite you in the butt.
Right. It's a poor name, but I am absolutely rooting for Tesla. And I think when you move fast, you break things. At least they addressed it and they offered compensation, even though it was only a max of $280, but they didn't have to do that. And yeah, but the Model 3 delivery timelines actually got pushed up. So that's a plus. And something else kind of falls by the wayside when you do that.
Now, last
Have
but
you,
not,
Bob, have you seen the evidence from the woman with the bike that was pushing a bike
Yeah,
across the street.
I saw that. That's another thing that was on the list for ad fails, but it's, we've
Good.
already talked about it, already covered it. It's not. And last but not least, apparently Facebook's new ad labeling policy forces all publications, I love this one, forces all publications that promote news articles to label themselves as political advertisements if the article touches on politics. Holly, this one must get under your skin as well. I mean, when you think about this one.
I just don't get it. That's the thing that grabs me. Like, you're talking about news, it's a news article. I know that we do have, polarized news agencies that, report on the spectrum, but I really hate treating users as if they're stupid enough to not know the difference between an advertisement and a news article.
I agree.
Oh,
with
I think that's a stretch. I'm sorry. I think people for years have not known the difference between an advertisement and an article. It was called advertorial years ago.
Yeah,
and
but
now
we're
it's
not
called
talking.
native advertising.
But we're not talking about this. We're talking about legitimate news or even illegitimate news, but still news content being labeled as political advertising. That's a slippery slope. That's pretty ugly.
Yeah.
Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound AdFail and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for The Beancast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.